Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStomp MTG. So with this video, I decided to revisit Gishath Sun's Avatar. A long time ago, I did make a Gishath Sun's Avatar deck. However, I felt like there were some tweaks that I did need to make, and so that's why today I'm presenting another video for you today with Gishath Sun's Avatar. So the first big tweak I do have for this deck list is the fact that it's going to be companioned with Kahira the Orphan Guard. With Kahira, it's basically just a companion that just gives your dinosaurs +1/+1 and vigilance. And plus, if you're running dinosaurs exclusively in this deck, there's no reason why you don't have it as your companion. Also, another big difference between my previous deck tech to this deck tech is the fact that I don't have any enraged dinosaurs in this deck. I feel like having enraged with Gishath was kind of janky in a way because you just want big splashy dinosaurs entering the battlefield that have big effect, and if you're just waiting for an enraged trigger, I feel like they're not the way to go personally. Plus, with the new Lost Caverns of Ixalan set, and you might as well include Ikoria and also some other miscellaneous dinosaurs from previous sets in this, I feel like there's personally a lot of different options you can choose just outside of Enrage. So to summarize some parts of the video, I do want to talk about basically the game plan of the deck. What kind of early game decisions do we want to make? What kind of utility dinosaurs are we running? And also what big splashy dinosaurs are we running? And of course, I do want to talk about the win cons of the deck because Gishath, we want to wait to close out the game. I mean, of course, we're going to be putting a bunch of dinosaurs on the battlefield directly, but there's a lot of ways we could take advantage of her ability. And honestly, there's a lot of ways we could just win the game by just taking out people with commander damage. So with that said, let's talk about the game plan specifically early on in the game. So there's a lot of options you could choose from as far as ramping because Gishath is 8 mana, so cards like Nature's Lore or 3 Visits are excellent early game options. So that way, when you go into turn 3, you will have 4 mana total if you put your land drop on that turn. So if you do have 4 mana on turn 3, you could definitely take advantage of that by casting spells like Migration Path or Skyshroud Claim. So that way, when you go into your turn 4, you could play a land and have 7 total mana, and just one more turn you could put Gishath out on the battlefield or some other dinosaur too. So I will say ramp is one of the most important things you can do in the game, or kind of cost reduce your dinosaurs. Say for example, use cards like Shadow and the Warp. I'll tell you what, I absolutely love this card because it has that first ability. The first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast, so that big giant creature you do want to be casting from your hand will cost 2 less, or even Gishath will cost 2 less too. Plus, whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, Shadow and the Warp deals 2 damage to that player, so it's a great hate piece, especially against those control players or tempo players that are trying to play spells each turn. So for me personally, this is an excellent include for sure. Another staple you should put in this deck is absolutely Smothering Tide. This is one incredible staple in many decks that you want to be ramping ahead, especially if your commander is a lot of CMC. So for obvious reasons, this is definitely a welcome include in the deck because you want to build up that treasure so that you can ramp into a Gishath or some other big dinosaur. So of course, in any kind of strategy, you want to have a good ramp package, and also you want to have a lot of good card draw outlets. So for example, Rishkar's Expertise and Return of the Wild Speaker are excellent. If you cast either one of these with your commander out on the battlefield, you're going to be drawing 7 cards, and with Rishkar's Expertise, you can cast something for free with mana value 5 or less. But I will say I do like Return of the Wild Speaker as the best card draw outlet in this deck, mainly because it has that ability of either overrunning your opponents or drawing cards. Plus, giving Gishath a total of 10 power isn't too shabby, especially when you can look 10 cards deep into your library so that you can put all dinosaurs from them on the battlefield. But the next card draw option I do want to talk about is Sylvan Library. So this is probably one of the best cards in the deck as far as top deck manipulation goes. So say for example you drawed your card, then you draw those 2 additional cards with Sylvan Library. And then both of those cards had dinosaurs in them. You could easily just put them back on top of your library. You don't have to take the damage, and then later on you can swing it with Gishath and then put those 2 dinosaurs on the battlefield. So yeah, that's just one scenario. Say for example another scenario comes across your way where you have Sylvan Library and you have Gishath on the battlefield. You don't draw into dinosaurs. You can just keep them into your hand. I know 8 life might seem like a lot, but again, life is just a resource, especially in Commander, so you definitely want to put those dinosaurs on the battlefield, so you may want to consider that. Another similar card I do want to mention is Sensei's Divining Top. This just kind of gives you the option to look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. So say for example we swing in with Gishath and somebody else has a 5/5 on the battlefield. Only 2 damage will come across to your opponent, and then you could use this in response to look at the top 3 cards of your library and put them in any random order. Say for example, the top 2 cards of your library weren't a dinosaur and that 3rd card was a dinosaur. You could rearrange that so the top card will be the dinosaur. So again, I do like that option mainly so that you could have that sense of security. Hey, I do have dinosaurs on the top of my library. I could just cast them with Gishath. But with that said, I do want to talk about some utility dinosaurs, some that you could cast early on into the game so that you could ramp into your other dinosaurs, or that you could kind of remove some stuff here and there. So for example, I did think of the Hulking Raptor. This is an excellent choice in the deck mainly because it has that Ward 2 ability, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you add 2 green mana. So this is pretty clear and simple. For 4 mana, you get a 5/3 body and Ward 2, and you could add some mana. Excellent choice overall on the deck, and especially if you get it early out on the battlefield. You do also want to make sure you have some card draw. So for example, I did think of Runic Armosaur and Curious Altosaur. I like these 2 options mainly because, of course, you want to draw into more answers against your opponents. Runic Armosaur will trigger based off of whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature or a land that isn't a mana ability, and Curious Altosaur will trigger based off when dinosaurs deal combat damage to your opponents. So of course, I do have a bias towards Curious Altosaur because the more dinosaurs you do have on the battlefield, the more you can swing in, connect with your opponents, and draw more cards. Say for example, you have 5 total creatures on the battlefield, you swing in with all your dinosaurs, and you draw 5 cards. And I do know I kind of keep rehashing this here and there, but I do feel like this is going to be a staple to come in any dinosaur deck for sure. But you do want to make sure you do have removal as well. That's why I did include Bronzebeak Foragers and Scion of Calamity. You'll also notice there's a lot of the new pre-con cards from the Commander deck Velociraptor in here. And for good reason, because they both are excellent removal options. Bronzebeak Foragers basically acts as a Grasp of Fate when it enters the battlefield and can put cards into the graveyard. With Scion of Calamity, it does have the Myriad ability to make copies of itself swinging at each opponent. Also, when this does connect to your opponents, it'll destroy a target artifact or an enchantment that player controls. So as far as everything goes, these 2 are excellent removal cards, but there is the old saying, the best kind of removal is player removal. That's why Scytheclaw Raptor is going to be excellent in this deck for 2 and a red. Whenever a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, Scytheclaw Raptor deals 4 damage to them. So I'll tell you what, I played with this card about a couple times, and it puts serious work in. One time in one game, I dealt about 40 damage, spread around to all my opponents, based off them casting spells not on their turn. So seriously, this is one insane card that I feel like will go in any kind of strategy where you want to punish your opponents for just playing spells not on their turns. Also, a way we could clear the way for Gishath to swing in for combat damage is by using cards like Kinjali Sungwing. It simply says for 2 and a white as flying and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. For me personally, I do find this really good, especially against those people who like to play a lot of hasty creatures on the battlefield. They will just enter the battlefield tapped, and if your opponents do know that Gishath's coming on the battlefield, they want to have a way where they could block Gishath so you don't get that trigger to have dinosaurs enter the battlefield. But with Kinjali Sunwing, you don't have to worry about that. They will enter the battlefield tapped, and the next turn you could swing in with Gishath, not even having to worry about anything. So quite honestly, a very good card. Another card I do want to mention is Bonehorde Dracosaur. So first of all, this does have great utility in the deck. Even just being a 5/5 flying first strike on the battlefield is pretty incredible just for 5 mana, but it does have more stats than just that. It does read at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exile the land this way, you create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. If you exile a non-land card this way, you create a treasure token. So of course with this, there's a lot going on. In that paragraph of text, you could exile the top 2 cards of your library, so essentially pseudo card draw. And depending on what you do exile, you can make a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token or a treasure token so that you could ramp into Gishath. Plus again, the stats are pretty good, so honestly this is an excellent card choice, and plus a dinosaur dragon, I mean what's not to like about this? We did also get some incredible choices from the new Universes Beyond Jurassic World set that came out of Lost Caverns of Ixalan, so there's a lot of fun options overall. So first up, I do have to mention my favorite card out of the set, and that's Ravenous Tyrannosaurus. So this is a great 99 card. 6 mana for 6/6 isn't too bad because of course we do have the Almighty Dreadmaw that has that stat, so of course it's not that bad. Plus it does have Devour 3, so basically when it enters the battlefield and you sacrifice 3 to that Devour mechanic, you're going to be having 9/1/1 counters enter the battlefield with Ravenous Tyrannosaurus, making it like a 15/15. Plus it does have a pretty crazy ability. Whenever it attacks, it deals damage equal to its power up to one other target creature. Excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. So let's just go back to that example of Ravenous Tyrannosaurus being a 15/15. You swing in and somebody has an Esper Sentinel. You deal 15 damage to the Esper Sentinel, and then your opponent will take 14 damage out of that. So this is probably one of the gruelest gruel cards I've ever seen. Aside from the Ravenous Tyrannosaurus, I did also want to mention another one with Swooping Pteranodon. We do have a decent amount of flyers in this deck, so we can kind of use this trigger multiple times, but let's first read what it does. So for 3 red and a white, it has flying and haste. Whenever it or another dinosaur with flying enters the battlefield under your control, you gain control of target creature and opponent controls until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains flying and haste until end of turn. At the beginning of your next end step, target land deals 3 damage to that creature. So this is a pretty fun and flavorful card. For example, you're going to go into enemy territory, you swoop away one of their creatures on the battlefield, you gain control of it, and at the beginning of the next end step, target land deals 3 damage to that creature. So, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of find that last text kind of funny because technically the Swooping Pteranodon is picking up its prey, and if they don't want it anymore, they just drop it and the land will deal 3 damage to it. So I think honestly, it's quite flavorful. I do like the idea and concept of this. But let's move on to another Jurassic World card with Savage Orders. So this is from the 3rd Jurassic Park movie. It has a great ability. As an initial cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature with power 4 or greater, and you search your library for a dinosaur creature card, put it onto the battlefield and shuffle. It gains indestructible until your next turn. So for 4 mana, this is basically a natural order for your dinosaurs. You need a creature with power 4 or greater so that you could activate this ability, but that's not a big deal because of course, we are dinosaurs, we have a lot of power 4 or greater cards. And of course, you could search for your biggest and scariest dinosaur in your deck and put it directly into play. However, I do feel like the best dinosaur you could be utilizing in this deck, or one of them, at least from the Jurassic World series, is Hunting Velociraptor. This honestly works quite well because Gishath is an 8-drop. So Hunting Velociraptor reads for 2 and a red. It does have first strike, and dinosaurs you cast have Prowl 2 and a red. So essentially, if you hit somebody with a dinosaur like Hunting Velociraptor, all your dinosaur spells from either your hand or command zone will cost 2 and a red. So now, instead of your Gishath being an 8-drop, it's now going to be a 3-drop based off of Hunting Velociraptor. So in all honesty, this is a cracked card in the deck for sure. So in this last part of the video, I do want to talk about big splashy dinosaurs with big effects, or they're honestly just huge because of course we're cheating them into play with Gishath. So the first big and splashy dinosaur I do want to mention is Trumpeting Carnosaur. I like this because if you cheat it into play, you get a Discover 5 to cheat more things into play, or in the early game, if you need to remove a threat, you can discard it to deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker for 3 mana. So 2 mana and a red for a lightning bolt isn't the best, but again, it's versatile, it has that removal option, and if you cheat it into play, you're just going to get a big splashy effect out of it. That's what's really great about Trumpeting Carnosaur. Plus, it's a trample 7/6 for 6 mana. Come on. I did also want to bring your attention to Pantliza Sun Favored. So the reason why I did want to mention this, it's not necessarily big, but it is splashy. So for example, whenever it or another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may discover X, where X is the creature's toughness. You can only do this once each turn. So this does have a lot of different play. For example, if you cast a Gishath, you're just going to be discovering 12 based off of Pantliza's ability. So this is just another fun include I wanted to mention in this video. Speaking of Galta, why not include her with Galta Stampede Tyrant? So for 8 mana, it does have trample and it's a 12/12. When it does enter the battlefield, put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So yeah, this card is absolutely disgusting. You could either natural order into it or savage order into it, so it enters the battlefield, cheat it in, and on top of that, you put all creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield, like your big splashy dinosaurs. Plus, if you do get that ETB, you could use a card like Return of the Wild Speaker in response to that ETB, so that you could draw 12 cards and then put any creature on the battlefield that you drawed that turn. This is going to go into a lot of my Stompy Green decks for sure to come. Speaking of which, another crazy ETB we could utilize in this deck is Atali Primal Conqueror. It has that ability of when it enters the battlefield, you essentially exile the top card of each library until you reveal a non-land card, and you may cast that non-land card. So honestly, this is perfect in the deck, especially if we have a lot of blink options, and you could transform it into the backside as a Blightsteel Colossus. But nothing could be more terrifying than Zacama Primal Calamity being a 3-headed dinosaur with some amazing stats as Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, and when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it untap all lands you control. Plus it does have 3 different modes of dealing 3 damage to a target creature, destroying target artifact or enchantment, or gaining 3 life, depending on which mode you pay into. I will say the one downside to Zakama is that when it enters the battlefield and if you cast it, that's the biggest downside, because of course you want to be cheating this in and you won't get that cast trigger basically. But aside from that, there's nothing to scoff at being a 9/9 for 9 mana and having all those abilities, so this is an excellent include in the deck for sure. And obviously a lot of people are very familiar with Zakama, but of course I do have to reemphasize her power and abilities. But of course you also do want to win the game. There are some ways you can win the game, at least in this deck specifically, that I wanted to focus on. So for example, I wanted to focus on extra combats because we want to get that Gishath trigger as much as we can. So using cards like Wave of Aggression, Seize the Day, and Relentless Assault will get the job done for us. So of course Gishath being a 7/6 means that 3 hits away for our opponents will be a good game for them because of commander lethal damage, so the more extra combats we could utilize, the more we could get rid of our opponents. Other extra combat spells I do want to mention is Last Night Together and Savage Beating. Last Night Together is actually pretty powerful because you could choose 2 target creatures, untap them, put 2 1/1 counters on them. They gain Vigilance, Indestructible, and Haste until end of turn. After this main phase, there's an additional combat phase. Only chosen creatures can attack during that combat phase. So of course with that, Gishath will become a 9/8, but most importantly, indestructible. So you have that way where your opponents might block into it, maybe double block into it, but it won't die because of that indestructible ability. And Savage Beating could be extra deadly in this deck because you could either give Gishath double strike or untap all creatures you control, and there's an additional combat phase. You could also entwine it so both abilities happen. And a double strike Gishath with an extra combat is going to be extra deadly, of course. Of course, why not get some infinite combats by using Aggravated Assault? There is some card that just came out of the new Lost Caverns of Ixalan set called Poetic Ingenuity. We're really more focused on that first ability. Whenever one or more dinosaurs you control attack, create that many treasure tokens. So if you have 5 dinosaurs on the battlefield and you do swing in with them, you'll make 5 treasure tokens, and then you can pay into that Aggravated Assault ability so that you can repeat the process for infinite combat. Last time I made Gishath, I didn't really put infinite combats in there. I focused more on some enraged creatures because there's not really an enraged focused commander, but now that there is, I wanted to focus more on splashy effects and also extra combats. So overall, I do feel like Gishath did get a big giant buff from this set, of course because of dinosaurs, and also, come on, that new art just looks so cool. I love that art. I want multiple copies of it for sure. But let me know down below in the comments, what did you think of this video? Did you think that Gishath did get a buff out of the set? Of course, I did think she did, but I do want to hear your thoughts and opinions. Also, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.